Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. How you doing?
Good morning.
Doing today? We're in the March the 2nd, Tuesday.
May 2nd? May 2nd?
I just said that. I just did that again. May 2nd. May 2nd, Tuesday, May 2nd. This will be airing. And gosh, we're into May already. And you and I, as we know, actually this week that we're actually airing, you're coming to Colorado to do the C12.
That's right.
C12 annual meeting that we get to be partakers of and enjoy that, as well as it's another great opportunity for us to multiply to a great audience that has a heart to hear. So that's going to be fun. And then, of course, we're heading over to Europe for Tuscany retreat for our leaders, and some other cool stuff. And so we have a big May and June coming up.
Right.
It's going to be fun, and life is, you and I talk about partaking of the abundant life, and we certainly have the privilege of that in lots of different aspects. But of all the things that we enjoy of the abundant life, it's really just being together.
Such a blessing.
Yeah.
You are so right.
Yeah, is the because our leaders, we meet on the phone, and we also meet in person, and because that we are actually experiencing what we've been talking about in the prayer of Paul, is that we're partaking with the saints the abundant life of God, because we've learned to live in the light, live in the kingdom,
Right.
and it's way, way, way better than that, than not, and we've learned that. So we encourage each other and we rejoice with each other. But when we get together and we talk about the beauty of the kingdom, is just being together is a joy all by itself.
Right.
And just laughing and sharing and talking and discussing and
And
enjoying.
it honestly doesn't matter if you haven't seen them in a year. Somebody who hasn't been able to come to one of our gatherings, I know we're all on the phone together monthly and stuff, but if we haven't seen each other in 6 months, haven't seen each other in a year, it is like a homecoming.
Yeah.
When everybody gets together, you are looking forward to just being together with other people who are abiding and honestly sharing the stories. Like, that is one of my favorite things, is one, just laughing together and being, but also just celebrating and magnifying God and hearing the stories of the things he's doing. It encourages your heart so much.
Yeah. And there is a sweetness to that, which actually never really leaves. So that literally,
Right.
like you say, you could just, all of a sudden you're together after 6 months, you just pick up
Right where you left off.
That
right?
sweetness, that's there. And then one of the aspects of it is that we are encouraging each other, because we're praying for each other, and we're discussing with each other really what Paul is saying is this is all about, is we are praying on your behalf that you would discover God's will, that you would be worthy of it by learning to walk in faith,
Right.
that you are living in the kingdom and not being influenced by any power of darkness. Doesn't mean you won't experience problems, but that you're not dominated by that power. And we're actually praying that for each other, and then we rejoice at experiencing the partaking, as well as when we're together. We're going to say, what is the things that you are seeking God's will for? Which, by the way, it's constant and it's always. So even as you get resolution to some things, you got other decisions.
Something new comes up.
other adversities, other things that have to be dealt with. And so we do when we get together, we do say, hey, what is things that you're seeking God's will for? And we're going to help each other, because we not only pray this, but we actually facilitate it.
Right.
And that is, okay, you got this. So let's go seek God's will. And if you're going to be worthy, you got to walk by faith. So by definition, our
Right.
question to each other,
Yeah.
what are you hearing?
Right. Right.
And sometimes like, I'm not sure yet, or I've heard a little bit. Okay, what do you think is true? What do you see? What's the good next step? And we're facilitating both rejoicing at things that are wonderful to experience, and we know that there's adversity, there's things that have to be dealt with, and we're just going to stay together in that place of let's go seek His will, so that we can partake of the inheritance which He promises, and we say to each other, it's gonna happen. Now we don't know how yet, and we don't know what yet, but we know it's going to happen. So let's stay together. And that's why we have sweetness, because even when you're struggling, you get to be with people that know that, well, it'll be okay.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're not going to have trouble. It doesn't mean this is awful, not awful.
And
yes.
stand arm in arm with you, seeking God's will, seeking His word, encouraging, praying.
And we're going to be strengthened, with you as we begin to experience this. Okay, so let's continue. He goes on to explain. He said, now something about this that you really need to grab hold of is why you can live this way. So read verses 15 through 18, Colossians 1, 15 to 18. He's been praying and explaining things, and he makes this amazing statement here in 15 to 18.
Sure. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by Him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. And He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things He may have the preeminence.
Okay. So first of all, it says that He's reflective of the invisible God who's spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Christ was physical.
Right.
And that's why Christ could say, well, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Right.
Because I'm the image of it. Okay, now this is a subtle truth that's implied, but it's not stated. Where is Christ now?
In the kingdom.
And what about us? Where is He relative to us?
Well, within us.
He's within us. Okay, so He's in us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are physical.
Right.
So we, because Christ is in us, are the physical representative of the invisible God.
Right.
He said now, and this is why the prayer is so powerful, is that I'm going to carry out life through you.
Mm-hmm.
You now are me, because I'm living within you.
Truly being ambassadors for Him.
You're now
as
living.
we bring Him in.
And you are the image of me. And He says now, I need you to understand something about this, is that in verse 16, by Him what?
All things were created that are in heaven and on earth.
And keep going.
Keep going, okay. Visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through Him and for Him.
Okay. And this is where these words matter.
Okay.
And that's why abiding is, well, write out all the verses, write out the verse, get all those words down, and start to pursue these words. So like, let's just take a statement: by Him, through Him, and for Him.
Right.
Okay, so it's both I did it by me, I did it through me, I did it for me. Okay, what did He do? In verse 16.
Creation. He created the heaven and the earth and all of these things.
Okay, so He said, I created everything.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, it includes you.
Right.
But all things, so he's talking all things physical, all opportunity, for circumstances. He says, I've created it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it through my power, for my power, and by my power.
Mm-hmm.
And we know something about that out of Hebrews, is that how was the world created?
By his word. He spoke it into being.
So he says, spiritually is superior to the physical. Why? Well, I wasn't created.
Mm-hmm.
I created. So everything that I created is subordinated to my power.
Right.
Because, wow, I speak it. So my spiritual power is superior to your physical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, he's talking about ultimately about circumstances. And he says it includes heaven and earth. Things that are in heaven, things that are on earth, visible and invisible, with their thrones, dominions, principalities, or powers, so that even when you think of, and he's talking about the angels and the demonic,
Right.
and the hierarchy of that, dominions, thrones, structure.
Right.
He says, I'm superior to all that.
To all of it.
Visible
That's that
and
preeminence.
invisible, which again, when you tie this to what Paul says in Ephesians, is that I've blessed you with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies, operating in the earth, the physical. Why? It's a unit. He says, don't think of, because we tend to think, well, God was in heaven, he created an earth, and he's in heaven and we're in earth. He said, actually, and you can go back to Genesis on this, I created it together.
Right.
So even my spiritual place is even different than that. That when I create heaven and earth, visible and invisible, it's a unit. It operates together. And that's why when you're in my kingdom, you are in the heavenlies, operating in the invisible, so that we could
here on earth,
so that we could influence the visible, because they're a unit. And he says, I created them together. I created everything through me and for me. And then he says, because of that, in verse 17, just read verse 17, and therefore, what?
He is before all things, and in him all things consist.
Okay, so all things were created by him. All things were created through him. All things were created for him.
Right.
And in verse 17, in him, what?
All things consist.
It's all there.
All things are held together.
They're all held together in me. And heaven and earth are a unit. The kingdom is to be functioning in this physical place. So don't look at kingdom as later when you die. It's here.
Right.
And it's spiritual, and it's heaven. And I'm asking you to join me there, because if you're going to partake in real stuff, you have to be in the invisible kingdom that's superior in power to the physical. And it's all because why? Because I created it. And everything is subordinated to me, and then therefore that's why he can make the statement, and he makes it both Old Testament and New Testament. Nothing is too what? Difficult.
Difficult, right.
Okay, how come?
Because he can speak and change. He is preeminent. He does have authority, full superiority and supremacy.
Yeah, because my power supersedes it. So he says, and this is important to partake, he says, if you look at life as do your best to follow the precepts of Scripture and maneuver your way through in the natural, and that explains why you have difficulty, is because you're not accessing the superiority of what I do, because why? None of that is too difficult for me. How come? It is under my authority. Now, we got to put this together. He says, be careful that you don't say, well, because it's under your authority, then can't you get rid of it?
Right.
And
which we spent several episodes talking about the Nashville incident in April, talking about that very thing.
And can't you change it and take me out of it? He says, no. He just says, I'm superior to it. And because of that, no matter what the world throws at you, by the way, it's a place of kill, steal, and destroy, trouble, difficulty, death, awful stuff. I can change it when you're with me in the kingdom, and that's why faith is so critical, is what do I speak? Because I can change things, because it's absolutely subordinate to me. And that's why he says I can say nothing, zero. Doesn't matter what you got going. It's not too difficult for me. Okay, now think about the encouragement of that. And we do that as when we meet. We talked about meeting. When we come, we have difficulty. And it seems overwhelming to us.
Right.
The one thing we tell each other, well, nothing's too difficult for God.
Right.
So don't lose hope. I don't know yet. And remember, from our perspective, it's like, I don't see how any way this is going to get resolved. Looks to me like you're in a double bind. And it looks to me like there's no way we're going to get through this. But God says, nothing's too difficult for me. Why? Because I'm superior to it. And that's why Paul puts this in this aspect of the prayer, is that the reason that all of this is true is because of the superiority of Christ. And you can count on it, and you can be confident of it. And then he says, if you put two and two together, in verse 18, therefore, he is what?
He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence.
Okay, so he says now, to live it out, he does it through you, who is the body of Christ. He's the head and you're the body. He says, so this is going to be fulfilled through you, not absent of you.
Right.
That's why abiding is so critical, is that connect to the vine. He says fruit doesn't come from the vine, it comes from you being connected to the vine. And I can't do it without you, and you can't do it without me, because I'm the head and you're the body.
And what a beautiful thing that he has invited us to be a part of that.
Yeah.
When you think about that.
And he said there's a cool thing about the head is what? It's all powerful. And nothing's too difficult for him. And so stay with me, become my body. The head is the leader. Let me lead and guide and walk by faith. And he says, so therefore, in all things, he may have what?
Preeminence.
Okay, now, and we actually had a discussion about this, about idols, is what does it mean that Christ is preeminent?
That he is truly the supremacy and the authority. He is above all, and is rightfully that in our hearts too. When you talk about idols, he wants that supreme place. He wants our entire heart and directed towards him. Yeah,
and preeminent is the word there is that he's first and foremost and always. First. To who? The body. In order for all this to work, first of all, you never have to guess. Is this too difficult for God? Nope. How come? I created it all.
Right.
It exists because I created it all. And I've got authority over it. Don't worry. I can speak to it. So trust that. If you trust it because of that, and see that what it drives us to, because the question that everybody has when they start is, okay, wait a minute. He's all powerful. He's good, supposedly. Nothing is too difficult for him. Well, then, why do I have so much difficulty?
Right.
Then it seems to me that there are things that are too difficult for him because I never see the benefit of it. And the people around me, I don't see them having it either. So wait a minute. It seems all theological to me, and isn't that nice? But I guess it means heaven. Heaven meaning when I die.
Right.
He says, no. He says, the body has to stay connected to the head. And the way to do that, I have to be preeminent in all things. Okay, so when, God's speaking, do I have to be preeminent?
All the time.
All the time. Okay, now let's talk about that. If I'm going to put Christ preeminent, and see, Paul is putting the entire thing together. Go back to verse 9.
Okay.
And just read that. If we're gonna make things preeminent, Paul says it starts with this. What does he say in verse 9?
For this reason, we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you and ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding.
Okay, so if I'm going to put Christ preeminent, what's my attitude toward everything I got?
That it's his.
And then I'm seeking what?
Seeking his will.
Seeking his will, and everything all the time about everything. He says, I got to be preeminent in all things, in all the stuff you're dealing with. So therefore, you got something that came up today. You got something that's a decision to make. There's an adversity. There's a difficulty. There's a problem. He said, if I'm preeminent, what will you do?
You'll come ask me about it.
What do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
That's it. And by definition, you just put me preeminent because what? I have the answer. You know who's got the answer. By the way,
Right.
I can answer this not by just a natural maneuvering. I can make things happen.
Right.
And you know that. So instead of you, I'm going to go, before you do that, why don't you just ask what I have to say about this? By definition, when you do that, you've just put me preeminent.
Right.
And by the way, by definition, if you've done that, you have demonstrated you're with me in the kingdom because you've surrendered your will to actually hear what I have to say. You didn't say it intellectually. You actually, okay, I really want to know. And I expect to get wisdom, to get understanding, to
hear your voice,
to walk in faith, to stay
to
in
be given the strength to walk it out
and
too. Yeah.
Since nothing is too difficult for you, and you're preeminent, not only in my heart, but you're over everything completely, and nothing is too difficult for you. Well, then I'll just stay with you until I see it. And why? You'll partake of it. So you see how Paul puts this whole thing together?
I love that.
Is how beautiful it is. And so he starts with, I pray that you have a heart to seek his will. And then he ends this section of it, and we'll go one more section tomorrow, is that because of who he is, learn to go to him first, all the time, foremost, every time, all the time. What do you have to say? What do you have to say? What do you have to say? Because he said my speaking is going to, first of all, initiate your desire for faith and hearing. I'll take you to believing it, and then you'll get to experience it. And that's why Paul writes it this way, is he said, I just pray that everybody gets it. Because if you do, your life is going to be spectacular, and you'll be giving it away all over the place because people will say, is that possible for me? And you're going to say, yes. And you'll have that sweetness. The more and more people that you can gather around you that have that same understanding, the sweeter and sweeter and sweeter life's going to be, despite the problems that you have. So it's nothing but I just wish I could tell you more and more and more and more and more of it. But Paul is laying it out so clearly. And the key is he's got to be preeminent. And if he is, all of this will become absolutely true, and your prayer life will just explode in joy.
Along with just that intimacy with God.
Yeah,
Yes.
and remember, it's not about God, would you? It's, I have these real situations. What do you have to say? And the prayer life explodes with my dialogue, understanding, walking, processing, and we will partake of the inheritance, which is the answers that we're going to get. So
that's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And so we'll pick this up again. There's more to it because he goes on to say a couple more interesting things about here's where it's headed and what you can be assured of. But he basically has said, nothing's too difficult. Don't worry. Go to him. Take your toughest stuff that you think there's no way this can get resolved.
And trust him with it. Go and ask him. Seek him.
And go with other people to help you. But learn it. And when you learn it, you will be the bearer of that partaking, and people will want to have the same understanding, which is what we're committed to. So we just wish you do. And again, if you have questions, send them in, the questions at afjministry.com, even specific stuff. What about? I got a problem.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be generic. It could be, hey, I got this issue, and I don't know what to do with it. Well,
right. Where do I go? What do I do with this?
We want to help you with that. So be willing to send it in. We're happy to help you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rich, and thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
We'll see you then. Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.